Welcome back, everyone. Ready for something a little different? Today, we're taking a deep dive into some philosophy with Emmanuel Coccia's book, The Sensitive Life.
Oh, this is a fascinating one.
It is. Now, full disclosure, the book was originally written in Italian.
Oh, okay.
So some of the terms might sound a little unusual in the English translation.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But stick with it.
Right.
Because Coccia's ideas are anything but stuffy. They're all about rethinking how we experience the world through our senses.
Yeah, he's really getting at something fundamental there, the way we see, hear, touch, taste, all of it.
Exactly. Coccia calls this the sensitive realm, and he argues that it's the foundation of, well, everything. It's not just something happening in our heads. It's out there, shaping our lives in ways we probably don't even realize.
It's like the world is speaking to us through our senses.
Right. And he even goes so far as to say, I love this quote, "We live because we can see, hear, feel, taste the world around us, and only thanks to the sensitive do we come to think."
Ooh, that's good.
Powerful, right. He's flipping the script on that traditional idea of the mind being superior to the body.
Yeah, like our intellect somehow transcends our physical experience.
Exactly. Coccia is saying that our senses actually make thinking possible in the first place.
It's a much more grounded way
Yeah.
of looking at things. Our senses are our connection to the world.
Absolutely. And he actually builds on the work of another philosopher, Helmuth Plessner, who was really interested in what our senses make possible for us as humans. But Coccia takes it even further. He asks, what form does life itself take within this realm of sensation?
Not just human life, but all life.
Precisely. Plants, animals, humans, we're all connected through this sensitive realm.
And that connection is what allows us to experience the world, to understand it, to be part of it.
Exactly. It's like we're all part of this grand sensory orchestra.
I like that. A sensory orchestra.
But here's the thing. Modern thought, especially since Descartes, has often seen images as kind of secondary to the real world, like they're just mental constructs.
Yeah, almost like shadows of real objects.
Right. But Coccia says, hold on a second. These images actually have their own way of being, their own reality.
They're not just in our heads. They're out there, shaping how we experience everything.
And he even argues that they have a separate ontological status.
Meaning
They exist. They're not just pale imitations of the real thing.
that's a pretty radical idea.
It is. And it leads to some pretty mind-blowing questions, like where do these images come from in the first place? How do they get generated?
That's where things get really interesting. Coccia uses the term physics to describe this process.
Physics, like with atoms and molecules and all that.
Well, not exactly. He's using physics in a more philosophical sense. He's asking, how do things become perceptible to us?
So how does something go from just being out there to actually being something we experience through our senses?
Right. And he gives this great example from Aristotle, who said, if someone places something colored right before their eyes, they will not see it.
So just because something's there doesn't mean we'll actually perceive it.
Right. There has to be this process of transformation. The object has to become a phenomenon.
Okay, so there's this in-between space then, where the object isn't just an object anymore, but it hasn't become a thought in our minds yet.
Exactly. It's a liminal zone. The object is becoming an image.
It's like a ghost of the object
Yeah.
or a messenger.
I love that. A messenger of sensation.
Yeah.
And, Coccia uses this really cool analogy to help explain all of this. The mirror.
Ooh, the mirror. Tell me more.
Well, he's not talking about vanity here. He's interested in how a mirror reveals what he calls the mediality of images.
Mediality. I'm already feeling my brain stretching.
It's a big word, but basically it means that images exist in this in-between space, a kind of hyperspace between the subject who's perceiving and the object being perceived.
Okay, so like when I look in the mirror, I see myself, but it's not really me, right? It's not my physical body, and it's not just a thought.
Exactly. You become pure visibility, separate from both your body and your mind. And that's Coccia's point. Images have their own way of being. They exist outside of both the object they represent and the subject perceiving them.
So they're not just reflections, they're entities in their own right.
Precisely. They have their own unique reality in this hyperspace.
That's wild. Okay, so we've got these images floating around in this in-between space, but they're still real. So what makes them so special? What are their properties?
Well, Coccia lays out a few key ones. First, he talks about their externality, meaning they exist outside of both objects and minds.
Like they're free agents, little nomads of the sensitive realm.
I love that. And then there's their non-corporeality,
Non-corporeal, meaning
meaning They don't take up space or have weight like physical objects do. An image in a mirror doesn't make the mirror heavier.
True. It's like they're there, but not really there. So if they're not physical, how do they have any effect on us at all?
That's a great question, and it leads us to another fascinating property, their relationship to size.
Okay, how does that work?
They're not extended in space like physical objects are, but they still retain the appearance of dimensions. Think of a giant billboard. It has size and shape, but it's not physically taking up that much space.
So it's like they have a ghostly kind of size.
Exactly. And then there's this idea that Coccia borrows from medieval philosophers, the weakness of being.
Weakness of being, what's that all about?
Well, these philosophers saw the being of images as less substantial, less real than the being of the objects they represent. Like a shadow is less real than the object casting it.
So the images are like these faint echoes of the original.
Right. But the thing is, in our modern world, images are everywhere. We're surrounded by them.
So are you saying those medieval philosophers got it wrong? Have images become more powerful?
That's a great question. And it's something Coccia is wrestling with. He's asking us to rethink the role of images in our modern world.
I'm sensing a but coming.
But
Yeah.
before we get into all that, we need to talk about the medium.
The medium.
Yeah, this is a key part of Coccia's theory. The medium is basically the space where images are generated.
Give me an example.
It could be air, water, a mirror, even the surface of a canvas. Anything that allows an image to appear.
So it's this in-between zone again. Not the object itself, not our minds, but this other space. What makes something a medium, though?
This is the crucial part. A medium can receive forms without being transformed by them.
So it's like a container. It can hold any image without becoming the image itself?
You got it. One medieval philosopher described it as passion without transformation. The medium is affected by the image, but its essence stays the same.
So it's holding the image, but not becoming the image. It's like
Right.
air. It can carry sound waves, but it doesn't become the sound.
Exactly. Think of a mirror. It can reflect any image without becoming that image itself. It exists in a state of what Coccia calls privation of those forms.
Deprivation.
It means it lacks those qualities. It's empty in a sense, waiting to be filled.
Waiting to receive the image. Okay. I'm starting to get it. But why is this whole thing with the medium so important?
Because the medium is what allows for abstraction.
Abstraction, like in art.
Yes. But even more broadly than that, it means separating a form from its usual material existence. The medium allows the form to exist independently as an image.
Whoa. Okay, my brain is doing backflips now. So the medium is like the key to this whole world of images.
You could say that. And here's why it's so important. Because images are separate and independent. They can be multiplied. They're not tied to a specific object or place anymore. They can travel, be copied, be shared.
So instead of just one object and one image, it's like infinite images.
Exactly. Images are everywhere, in our minds, in our art, on our screens, in our conversations. And this endless multiplication of images makes the world way more complex and interesting than we might imagine.
Okay, I am so ready for part 2 of this deep dive. But before we move on, I have to ask, what about humans? We're not just passively receiving these images, right?
Great question. That's where things get even more exciting. Because humans have this unique ability to actively produce images.
Like we're image-making machines.
In a way, yes. We speak, we draw, we create art, we build worlds with our imaginations. We don't just receive the sensitive world, we actively shape it. And that, according to Coccia, is what makes us human. He calls it the sensifying of the spirit.
Beautiful. We're taking the raw material of the sensitive world and making something new, something uniquely human.
Exactly.
But how does that work? How do we create those images? How do we share them? And what does it all mean for how we understand ourselves in this world of images?
All great questions, and I think they'll lead us into some really fascinating territory.
I can't wait. But for now, I think my brain needs a little break to process all of this.
I hear you.
We'll be back soon with part 2 of our deep dives into the sensitive life. We'll be exploring how these images shape our identities, our relationships, and our very experience of being human.
Don't miss it.
Okay, I think I've recovered from part 1. My brain is ready for more sensitive life.
Good. Because we're about to get even deeper into this world of images.
Last time we left off with this idea of the sensifying of the spirit. How humans aren't just receiving images, but actually creating them.
Exactly. And that's what we'll be exploring today. How we humans shape the sensitive world.
So walk me through it. How does this whole image-making process actually work?
Well, think about all the ways we communicate using images. We tell stories, we paint, we make music,
Right.
even language itself. Coccia actually argues that language is a form of sensitivity.
Whoa, really?
He calls it an archimedium, a kind of ultimate medium where images can exist on their own, separate from both the speaker and the object they represent.
Okay, hold on. So you're saying words themselves are like little packets of images.
Exactly. Think about it. When you hear the word tree, what happens?
I picture a tree in my mind.
There you go. You don't just think of the letters T-R-E-E. An image pops up. Maybe it's a specific tree you remember or just a generic idea of what a tree looks like. But that image is part of what gives language its power.
Wow, I've never thought about language like that before. It's like every word is conjuring up a whole world of images.
And that brings us to Coccia's point. He argues that we never engage with the world directly. It's always through these images.
So it's like we're always looking through a lens, even if we don't realize it.
Exactly. We're always living in this medial space, this in-between zone, surrounded by these messengers from reality.
And those messengers are the images.
Right. And the mediums, whether it's air, water, language, whatever, are what make communication possible in the first place. They're like the connectors between a subject and an object.
So without mediums, we'd be totally isolated, trapped in our own minds.
Exactly. No way to connect with the world or each other. Think about it. No love letters, no movies, no internet memes.
Now that's a bleak thought. But it really highlights how essential this sensitive realm is. It's not just some abstract philosophical idea. It's the very foundation of our social lives.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And this brings us to another fascinating layer of Coccia's work. He talks about how our mental and emotional lives are shaped by something called projective images.
Projective images, like we're literally projecting our inner world onto the external world.
You got it. It's like we're constantly coloring the world with our own thoughts, feelings, and experiences. And this connects to a really cool concept from Lacan called the mirror stage.
Oh, I've heard of that. Isn't that about how babies recognize themselves in the mirror for the first time?
Exactly. And Lacan argued that this moment of self-recognition is crucial for developing